Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by the amazing John Massari. John, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, this is so awesome. You really influenced my childhood. For those of you that don't know, John is an American composer and sound designer, perhaps best known for Killer Clowns from Outer Space. You guys may have heard of this. But we'll talk about that. But I don't want that to be the only feather in the cap that I talk about, because you've worked on everything from Little House to the Prairie, The Wonderful World of Disney, Snake Eater. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. So when did you know that you wanted to be into composing, sound design, music for film? When did you know this is what I want to do?
Well, it was a culmination of experiences that led to kind of like a calling, I guess you can say. So when I was a little kid, I was always fascinated with music. Because it gave me an experience. It put me in a mood that I didn't quite understand. And I thought the people that created music, it was like magic.
Yeah.
And my parents were not musical people, but they appreciated music. They always had a nice hi-fi system in the house,
Sure.
back when I was a kid, it was a piece of furniture that, this mysterious box that played records, and we had a stereo hi-fi console, and I would play records all the time. I would constantly flip channels to listen to music, and even if it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and terrifying my parents. And then they got me a little AM radio that I kept by my bed, and I just would stare at it and listen to music all the time. And so by the time I was 6, I went to my first matinee, and there was three movies: The Time Machine, Mysterious Island, and Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Oh, very nice.
So that like really affected me. And I didn't understand that it was the music that affected me. And I started tinkering at the piano. My mom had got a piano. She never took piano lessons, but so I took up on it. And so it was by the time I was 11 years old, I realized, you know what, I got to be doing this for the rest of my life. I don't know how. I didn't know anything about it. I used to call it, we told my parents I want to become a music writer. I didn't know it was called composer.
Right.
I did everything you would do. You would take lessons, you'd be in bands. I played the trumpet, played piano, played the contrabass, the electric bass, some other brass instruments like the tenor horn or the euphonium, and the French horn, and percussion instruments. And then I played in hard rock bands, before it was called metal.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, it was around that time when I wrote a piece of music that was later to become the Killer Clown March. And
So cool.
I was like 16 going on 17, and I wrote this thing because our band was going to start doing originals, right? And they heard it and they go, it sounds too jazzy. It's not hard rock enough, because I was playing it on the piano. They didn't really get it. So that Killer Clown March that you hear in the movie, where they're marching onto the town after their first chase, is what was written, at least many years earlier, that I thought would be perfect for our Killer Clowns.
That's so awesome, because I think that a lot of times composers and even the score of a film can be underrated, because truthfully, a score can make or break a film. There are certain times when you look at films like Killer Clowns, you look at Halloween, you look at The Thing. I'm even thinking of like Creepshow is a big one where I love the score. Psycho, another one. Jaws. These movies that are so iconic that the minute you hear it, you know it. And newer composers, like you were talking about with like your Saw, your Dead Silence, these things. A score can be something that is so unnerving and so unsettling, or it can be that moment to break the tension. And that's what you guys really have to do when you're digging in. It's not like you just go there, you grab your instruments, you write something and go, here you go, work it in. You have to be able to know, am I breaking tension? Am I creating tension? All these different things that go into being a composer. And like I said, I personally, if it's got strings on it or I can pound on it, I'm okay. But once you give me something with my mouth, I'm awful. I'm done. You give me any type of woodwind or any type of brass, I'm out. I can't do it. Strings, percussion, I'm okay. I can hold my own. Much love and much respect to you for all the woodwind and the brass work that you can do. It's just I can't do it. It's something I've tried. I can't do it. I was more the guy that was chewing on his saxophone reed than using it to blow in. So, but and like I said, I think that when you look at a film, and even like I said with Killer Clowns, it's a whole production working together. You always get the director and you get the cast that's getting their credit, but would the film be what it is today without that score? And I don't think it would be. To say this is a cult classic film is an understatement. I don't think I've ever met anybody that is not absolutely adore Killer Clowns in Outer Space. And that's a big part to you. So thank you for your contributions to that film and over 100 titles throughout the history. I mean, you are a very, very busy guy that has not let off the gas pedal yet. So we appreciate the hard work that you do as well, my friend.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. For me, when I first saw Killer Clowns from Outer Space, the magic happened when I saw this in the forest. I said, oh my goodness, okay, I get what you guys are doing now.
Yeah.
Because the way it was presented to me was from another director and producer I've done a lot of things with. He says, I know some friends that they from back east, and there's the Kyoto brothers. They do a lot of special effects, and then doing this crazy movie. You may not be interested. Maybe you're too much of a serious composer to. I go, what's it called? They go, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and I go, oh my gosh, I've got to do that.
Right.
And not too long before I saw Killer Clowns from Outer Space, I saw Richard Elfman's, that's Danny Elfman's older brother. He directed a movie called The Forbidden Zone.
Okay.
And it was so bizarre. And I go, I've got to do a bizarre movie that when people see it, they go, I have to see that again.
Yeah.
It's got so much crazy stuff working on so many levels. And let me tell you, when I saw Killer Clowns for the first time, the only music it had in it was that great song by the Dickies at the beginning.
Okay.
And the rest of it was quiet. And it was actually really creepy without any music, to me, for my purposes. And I'm going, wow, this is a lot to work with. This is really awesome. And so I made the hard executive decision that I was going to treat the music very seriously, like do it like, there's a lot of influence of early 20th century composers in that music that I wanted to, that, and also, my influences of the Beastie Boys were the new thing. And of course, all, Van Halen and Metallica, they were all just like kids, at that time, because we're all the same age now. But I was totally loving the energy they've created in their music, and I wanted to like bring all that in to Killer Clowns.
And it works. I love the score on that film. And when I reached out to you and I heard back, I was so excited because to be able to talk to somebody, like I said, growing up, I was a big fan of music. I got the punk rock tattoo. Like that's, growing up,
Awesome.
I had a guitar in my hand everywhere I went. So
That's
I love
awesome.
to kind of dig into the mind of a composer and see, the influence and hearing all these different things that influence you. I mean, you talk about the Beastie Boys to Van Halen to Metallica. I mean, just those three alone right there, you got three genre benders right there.
Yeah, not too long after that, there was 9 Inch Nails, Trent Reznor, and and all the things he was doing. It's just, wow, that's so great. Everyone's like bending it, so to speak, in their own fashion. And one thing that's difficult when I think with me, what's really crazy when you decide to become a media composer, you have to do so many different things. You're almost like a wallpaper hanger. You know what I'm saying? You're almost, not that anything's wrong with the wallpaper hangers. There's some wallpaper hangers that design their own wallpaper and they expertly put it up and it's like a piece of artwork on your wall. But then there's the ones where it says, listen, we just need you to, slop hamburgers. We need you to create that thing called music so it like floats behind. That's why I think there's such a big propagation of production music, of which I've supplied tons of music for, where you can spend a lot of time doing very inspired music and it just gets licensed and relicensed to do other, I have music that's been used literally over the past 30 years and that's a long damn time, for all sorts of
Yeah.
things. And it still shows up in uh, uh, trailers for video games, or as part of a video game, because it's such a, I mean, I've done other pieces that are quote unquote iconic pieces, that have been in like the Toy Story video games, and they've been on the Disney Channel, and they've been on a variety of Nickelodeon programs and trailers and advertisements. There's a piece of all this music that I'm talking about, particularly music I'm talking about, was also in a car commercial. It was one of the last things that Leonard Nimoy did with the new actor that plays Spock.
Yeah.
And it was an Audi commercial. I'm going, that thing is never going to die.
And that's awesome. I mean, that shows.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. No, I always get tickled when I hear all the variety of different ways. What is another show? Parks and Recreation uses it all the time. It's like comes on every time something specific happens in the story. So I couldn't tell you because I haven't seen all of the episodes. I mean, one time they were at a convention, and like a sci-fi convention, and it played, and then I get my statements and I see it all the time. So
that's so cool.
So I'd rather that than someone says, can you do just like what you did before but do it again,
right?
So
and that's the thing, like, no, as a musician you want to grow, like you said earlier on, when your band went from doing covers to, hey, we're gonna do original music. It wasn't because you were going to make more money. It's because you want to grow as musicians. Like, that's your goal, and I get what you're saying. Hey, can you re-record your single from your last album for this one so we can press it again? No, I've already done that, and I want to grow.
That's why I tell directors and directors who direct film projects and media. I also tell it to composers. I said, let's take a relatively recent example. Directors did not approach Trent Reznor to write their film for their music because they wanted them to sound like John Williams. You know what I'm saying? Whatever you do musically, I really like it. Could you express my film in your unique language? And that's how you come up with great scores. And like same thing with Charlie Clouser. If you listen to Charlie Clouser's scores to Saw, you see so many awesome influences, but they're all kind of new. They're not the predictable ones you would expect from a horror score.
Sure.
So,
and I think that's what makes it work.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we talk about, I've had a couple different episodes on here where their first horror movie was Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and that wouldn't happen if it wasn't for you. So now I want to go back to the past, John, and I want to talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And John, your first horror movie was?
My first horror movie experience as an audience was The Haunting. It was made in the early 60s, and I saw it when it came on television, like in the late, probably like 1971. I was a kid, and it just terrified me to death. And I was up all night afterwards. I could not sleep. I actually stood, my window to my bedroom was on the second floor, and it faced east, so I could see the sunrise. And like, I figure I'm just going to stay in front of the window and watch the clear sky get lighter and lighter and lighter till the sun comes up, because that will be my safety. How primordial is that? Because I'm sure there was ancient peoples used to think, when the sun came down and it's dark, well, that's when you get killed. That's when a bear come over and eat you. That's when the tiger's on the prowl. So it's like, not only did I see something terrifying, and not like I was going to be eaten that night, but there was a scene where the girl, our main character, was in bed sleeping, and she thought one of her friends that was in the same room was clasping her hand. but it turned out there was a spirit that was clasping her hand, and it was a spirit of a scared child. And just that concept, it's like you didn't see anything. It's all
Right. Yeah.
psychological.
You just see that shadow on the wall. And then
Right.
she's just like, stop it. And then she sits up and she's like, whose hand was I holding? You're like, it's such a powerful scene. You don't need to see
she's
a bunch of
looking at
gore.
and she's looking at this design on the wall, and there's an effect. I forgot what it is. Your brain is looking for order, so it will kind of see, like, all of a sudden you can discern an outline of a face. But if you just glanced at it, you wouldn't see it. But you start staring at it, and the camera was so. The director, by the way, is the same director, David Weiss. He did the classic West Side Story in the late 50s, the musical. So he like zoned in on that, whatever that tapestry was, and all of a sudden you're looking at a face that's like in there, and it's subtle. You have to, the more you watch it, the more I notice a lot of people say, oh yeah, it's kind of in the center. You can make out a face, and that's what she's staring at, and that's where she thinks the voices are coming from. So anyways, so that was my first terrifying experience. And then later I went to my grandma, see my grandma. She says, you look so tired. I said, oh, I was up all night. We were watching a show. Described what it was about. She goes, listen, you don't have to worry about the people that are in the movies. It's the people walking out in real life that you have to worry about.
Right. Those are the scariest people.
Those are the scariest people.
So would you say that one with the wall, was that the one that affected you the most?
Yeah, that's the scene that I remember. It affected me the most because it was almost like the house was like trying to get that one character as its victim,
Yeah. And
I haven't seen it since then. I should watch it again just to get the feel for it.
It's definitely a blast. I watched it obviously so I could have a decent idea of what I was talking about. That way I wasn't out here shooting blanks with you. But there's another scene I would like to talk about that me and you kind of spoke about a little bit. And you see the door breathing, essentially. Right. Like this is where you kind of feel the house is alive when you see that door almost breathing. And I know that was a really effective scene for you as well. And this is where you're kind of getting to the third act. So at this point, what was going through your mind when you see the house, quote unquote, breathing?
I just wanted to leave the room. I wanted to run out of there, but then I was there. And my parents, they were fine with it. They just thought it was amusing.
They sound amazing.
I was absolutely terrified. And my sister she had conked out. She was asleep. My sister is 3 years younger than me.
So this is a movie where death is few and far between. But as horror fans, we do look at death in horror films. Mm-hmm. Do you remember which death it was in the film that affected you the most?
Gosh, you know what? I have to see the movie again. I know that the professor's wife got lost in the house, and she was just a complete, mess because she was lost and she couldn't find them, and they thought she was one of the spirits, But at the end, I think at the end, the girl disappeared. Our main character disappeared. We don't know if she died, but they couldn't find her
in the car crash.
Yeah.
And then you have the one at the opening of the girl falling down the stairs, which actually looks really good. Like even when you watch it now, that's a really good looking scene. So that's one that, also amused me as well. Not amused because that sounds really dark. I was amused by her death, but it's definitely one that stuck with me as I'm watching. So,
well, that's the talent of the director and cinematographer. And, it was in black and white.
Yep.
So that lends itself to, it's just like any art. If you limit your resources and you say, I'm going to use these like 4 tools to create my music, or to create my whatever it is you are, you work within that so that you can let your imagination run a little wild.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is a movie that I usually ask us during the podcast once we're getting towards the end of the actual movie we're talking about, but this movie was made at 72. Is that when it was?
Oh no, I saw it around 70, 72. I think it was made in 1962 or 63.
Okay. So it's been a couple days. Is this a movie that you would like to see remade today?
Okay, let me think here. You asked me if there's would make a good remake. I actually worked on a movie called From the Dark,
Mhm.
It was directed by Cliff McClelland and Tom Zembrod, and my good friend Todd Jenkins was one of the producers, and he also edited it. And it was about these people that wanted to stay at a house, and they discovered, as teenagers at the house, and the movie gets cheaper and cheaper because as you kill people off, there's less actors that have to
Sure.
show up. So the house, they found out, was haunted by these very ancient demigods, demons kind of thing. And they had these really neat jump scares where people would just like all of a sudden would just be snatched away into oblivion,
Right.
and they would be possessed and all that sort of stuff. So it's a kind of a similar setup.
Right.
I went to see a good friend of mine's, went to his wedding, and they just got a big house, and in that house they're going to have this, we're going to do all their productions. And I said, man, your first movie could be in this house. You come up with a nice solid script idea, and I mentioned The Haunting, you could just have a killer picture,
Yeah.
and you captivate people with the story,
Mhm.
just like movies, even something that's not a horror genre. Let's say Wall-E, the
Yeah.
Disney movie, right? That started out as a very specific concept and grew and grew and grew. And when they had a solid story, then they start doing their animation. So that's
Mhm.
the trick. That's the trick with any horror. I mean, it's almost like they're almost like folk tales that people can learn a life lesson from, you
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
uh, so to speak. That's what makes them so effective, because you're like sitting around the fire before going, and you're glad that you didn't experience that horrible tale. I think there's the relief after the movie's over,
Yeah.
that your life is not as bad as the horror movie.
What you just watched.
Yeah,
That's awesome. So,
yeah,
John, we did talk about your first horror movie being The
yeah.
Haunting and how that affected you, but now I want to go scream on you here for a second. What's your favorite scary movie, John? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
It's The Shining.
Of course.
Yeah, very classic filmmaking. I mean, how could you go wrong with Stanley Kubrick, for crying
Yeah.
out loud? And if
I mean,
you got to listen to Stanley Kubrick's. Oh, you got the what do you got there?
Room 217. It's behind me for every episode I do. That's how much that
Good
movie
for
means to me as well.
you. Good for you. That could be like a thing of jewelry too. You could wear there on your neck. But people that want to get into this business, doesn't matter what aspect of it. Boy, what's really great is that Stanley Kubrick has done so many interviews. He was a photojournalist
Mhm.
for Look magazine for quite a while, and he did a lot of fascinating interviews on his own. He interviewed fascinating people, and yeah, check out all of his work. He he's not considered a master filmmaker for no reason at all.
Right.
You know, some of his movies have almost like a documentary style feel to it. And then some of them, like The Shining. I just love the way they're like, he has the camera on his actors and says, "We are not cutting away. We're gonna keep on you," and
Keep on going.
it just works. It's just, when I first saw it, I was just like, wow. I was exhausted after I saw it the first time. I saw it with
Still
my
holds up,
sister.
man.
Yeah, I saw it with my sister. We said, let's go see a scary movie. And she says, we always go see scary movies and we regret it afterwards. You- we saw the Amityville Horror, and she says, Johnny, I need to sleep. We were in our 20s. Let's just sleep in the living room. You can sleep on the couch. I'll sleep on the other sofa. So, so anyways, that was it. The Shining.
That's awesome, man. What a
And
great
I
film, too.
should read the book, because I understand Mr. King doesn't like the way the movie story was
See, and I
treated.
love them both for different reasons. I
Yeah,
think that they both have their own special pieces to them. Well, John, this has been amazing talking to you about
it
horror and
has.
learning everything I can about you. We're at the third act now. The credits are about to roll, but before they do, I want to let everybody know I do have all of John's social media links right down here in the description. So make sure you're giving them a click. Make sure you're following him so you can stay up to date on what he's doing. But before we leave, John, we always end this with the same question. We're going to go back to the haunting. And what we're going to do now is we are going to rank this on a skull count. Now, what we're doing, we are not being critics. We're not ranking it on production or acting or score. What we're doing here is judging this movie strictly on how much it affected you. So 0 skulls, not effective. 5, very effective. And you can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. What would your ranking of The Haunting be?
Well, the 11-year-old terrified John would give it a 5.12.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I love, because I don't think if you're judging critically on something, you can give it a perfect score. I just don't think that it's possible. Yeah. But if you're judging on how something affects you, absolutely you can get a perfect score.
I mean, it kept me up all night, for crying out loud. I was staring at the dark, waiting for the sun to come up. And where the particular place that I was not too far from Disneyland. And your eastern view was of Saddleback Mountain. And I just knew that sun was going to cross over Saddleback Mountain, and then everything was going to be fine. And it was caused by that damn movie.
And I appreciate you coming on to have this conversation with me and talk about it. Like I said, guys, please make sure you're clicking the links down here in the description, showing him some love. John, don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.